There's something rather curious about the way we look at things. Most of us, we see the world through a kind of agreed upon lens, a collective understanding of what's acceptable to notice, what's safe to acknowledge, what we're permitted to question. And then there are those moments, perhaps you've had them, where you see something others don't or won't. Not because you're special, not because you possess some supernatural insight, but simply because you looked. You looked at what was actually there, rather than what you were told should be there. And in that moment, you discover something both liberating and utterly isolating. We live, all of us, in a kind of conspiracy. Not a conspiracy of malice, mind you, but a conspiracy of comfort. A collective agreement that certain truths remain unspoken, that certain patterns stay unnoticed, that certain questions simply aren't asked. It's rather like walking through a magnificent building where everyone has agreed to ignore the cracks in the foundation. You can see them hairline fractures spreading across the walls, but when you mention them, people look at you with a peculiar mixture of confusion and concern. What cracks, they say, not because they're blind, but because seeing the cracks would require something, a responsibility, a reckoning, an end to the comfortable illusion that everything is solid, stable, permanent. And so we learn early on, there are things it's better not to see. But here's the paradox. The moment you begin to see what others refuse to see, you can't unsee it. It's like learning a new word, and suddenly you hear it everywhere, or noticing the pattern in wallpaper you've walked past for years. Once the pattern reveals itself, it becomes impossible to return to the blur of unawareness. This is the hidden power and the hidden burden of clear seeing. You begin to notice the emperor has no clothes. You see the contradiction in the confident proclamation. You recognize the pattern that keeps repeating generation after generation with only the costumes changed. And people don't always thank you for this. Because when you see clearly, you hold up a mirror. And not everyone wants to look at their reflection when the lighting is honest. There's a peculiar loneliness that comes with this kind of seeing. You're standing in a crowd and everyone is watching the same performance. They're laughing at the designated moments, gasping at the scripted surprises, applauding when the conductor signals. And you've somehow glimpsed behind the curtain. You see the machinery, the pulleys and levers, the person feeding lines through the speaker, and you can't quite participate in the performance anymore with the same innocent enthusiasm. This doesn't make you better than anyone else. This is important to understand. You haven't transcended to some higher plane of existence. You've simply noticed something, and that noticing has changed the game for you. But here's what's beautiful about this loneliness. It's also a doorway, because when you can no longer participate unconsciously in the collective dream, you're forced to become conscious. You can't sleepwalk anymore. And in that wakefulness, there's a strange kind of freedom. You see, most people are afraid, terrified, really, of being alone in their perception. They'd rather doubt their own eyes than stand apart from the group. It's a survival instinct, of course. For thousands of years, being cast out from the tribe meant death. So we're wired to conform, to agree, to see what everyone else sees. But what if that very fear is the thing that keeps us imprisoned? What if the hidden power isn't in seeing what others fear to see, but in being willing to see it anyway, despite the isolation it brings? There's a difference, you understand, between seeing clearly and needing everyone else to see it too. The person who sees clearly and immediately becomes evangelical about their vision, they haven't quite grasped the nature of seeing yet. Because true seeing, it doesn't need validation. It simply is. Like the sun rising, regardless of whether anyone watches. Like the tree falling in the forest, making it sound whether or not there are ears to hear it. When you see what others fear to see, you don't need to convince them. You don't need to shout from rooftops or gather followers or prove yourself right. You can simply hold the seeing, carry it lightly, let it inform your movements without becoming righteous about it. Is the hidden power, the power of quiet knowing, not knowing in the sense of absolute certainty, because certainty is often just fear wearing a confident mask, but knowing in the sense of intimate familiarity with what is actually happening, beneath the stories we tell about what's happening. And here's where it gets really interesting. The very thing that others fear to see, that pattern, that truth, that reality, it's not actually dangerous. What's dangerous is the reaction to seeing it. The fear isn't of the truth itself. The fear is of what we'll have to do, who we'll have to become, what we'll have to give up if we acknowledge that truth. So we'd rather not look. We'd rather maintain the comfortable lie than face the uncomfortable transformation that truth demands. But you who have seen, you've discovered something the fearful have not, that the transformation is already happening anyway, whether we look at it or not, whether we acknowledge it or deny it. Reality doesn't wait for our permission to be real. So what do you do with this sight, this seeing that sets you apart? First, you must be gentle with yourself. You didn't ask to see this. You're not responsible for fixing it all. You're not the savior of the unseeing. You're simply awake at a moment when others are sleeping. And sleep too has its purpose, its timing, its season. Second, you must resist the temptation to become bitter. Yes, it's frustrating when people can't or won't see what seems so obvious to you, but bitterness is just another form of blindness. It keeps you from seeing the humanity in their not seeing. Remember, you too once couldn't see this. Something shifted, something opened. But it wasn't because you were superior or more deserving. Grace happened. Circumstance happened. The right pressure at the right angle happened. And third, and this is perhaps most important, use your seeing to see more, not to judge more. Because here's the secret within the secret. When you first see what others fear to see, you think you've reached the end of seeing. You think, I figured it out. I see the truth now. But that's just the beginning. True seeing is a practice, not a destination. The more clearly you see, the more you realize how much you still don't see. How many more layers there are. How infinite the depth of reality truly is. The person who has just learned to see becomes dogmatic about their vision. The person who has been seeing for a while becomes humble about how little they actually know. And that humility, that willingness to keep looking, keep questioning, keep being surprised by reality, that's where the real power lies. So you find yourself here, seeing what others fear to see, feeling the weight of that vision, the loneliness of it, the responsibility of it, and perhaps wondering, what now? Well, now you simply continue. You continue to see clearly without needing others to validate your vision. You continue to speak truthfully without needing others to believe your truth. You continue to live authentically without needing others to approve your authenticity. And in that continuation, something remarkable happens. You stop being afraid, not afraid of being wrong, not afraid of being alone, not afraid of being misunderstood, because you've discovered that the hidden power of seeing what others fear to see is the power to be free, free from the need for agreement, free from the prison of consensus reality, free to experience life as it actually is, rather than as we've been told it should be. And in that freedom, in that clear, quiet, undefended space, you might just discover that you weren't seeing against others at all. You were seeing for them, holding a space of possibility, a crack in the consensus, a reminder that there are other ways to look at this strange, beautiful, terrifying existence we're all sharing. Not better ways, necessarily, just other ways. And maybe that's all the hidden power ever was, the gentle, persistent reminder that we're allowed to look, we're allowed to see, we're allowed to know what we know, even when no one else knows it with us. And in that allowance, that's where freedom lives.